everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Today's episode is a wonderful conversation with Gemma Ellison, former lawyer turned co-founder of Heart Leadership, a consultancy that helps organizations build healthier, more human cultures. Gemma works with a wide range of businesses, both law and non-law, to design a culture centered around purpose at these organizations, grow confident, compassionate leaders, and create environments where people belong and do their best work. In this episode, we firstly discuss Gemma's childhood and how she decided to pursue a career in law and the motivations behind it for her, both the personal and professional challenges she faced before getting her training contract and also during those 2 years of that journey, the constant feeling of imposter syndrome that she faced over a decade-long career as a lawyer from the beginning and even when she was, 10 years in, but how she actually channeled that in a positive manner in her work, the transition from lawyer to entrepreneur for Gemma and the story behind starting Heart Leadership, and finally we talk about what the journey has been like with Heart Leadership for the last 2 years and her vision for the future of the organization. I genuinely loved recording this episode because of Gemma's ability to speak with such a vulnerability and compassion, really proving her sensitivity for the human condition, which is genuinely her superpower. The entire aim of this podcast is to bring forward the human journeys into law, and I really think that Gemma's story portrays that in such a beautiful manner, and I really hope that you can see that throughout this conversation. Just a quick request before we get into the episode. I'd really appreciate if you could kindly give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify or an Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to these episodes, as it really helps us reach more listeners. Without further ado, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi Gemma, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Super excited to talk to you about your journey and everything that you're doing at the moment. Before we start, we always have an icebreaker on the podcast, which is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. My superpower. Interesting. Okay, so my superpower, I would say, is, and this has been something I said about me, I have a sensitivity for the human condition. And what that means is I see people as they are. So, and I treat them as such. So I will, everyone is a human to me. So it doesn't matter if they're a CEO or if there's somebody who's just left school, they're still the same. It's all the same to me. So I really sort of get to the heart of seeing a person and treat them like they deserve to be treated. I guess that's my superpower.
Yeah, I love that. And would you say that that's always been a superpower of yours, or is it something that you have developed over time because of events or people in your life?
I think a bit of both, really. I think I came from a very, maybe we might get into it. I came from a very sort of deprived background in Liverpool, and so I saw a lot of people suffer. And obviously I went on to become a lawyer representing some of those people. So I've always had a sense of compassion about me. I've always known, do you know what? People have got struggles. Everyone has got struggles. So I think even from being a child, I've always been a kind person. I've always been somebody who in the playground, I would go and make friends with someone if no one was talking to them. So I've always had that sense of, and if someone did something wrong, I would always be thinking, okay, but why? Like, are you okay though? Why would you act like that? So I think seeing the human um, is always been something that I've done, regardless of what anyone's done or where they've been or what they've been through. I think I try and see the heart of them really. Which yeah, I've always been like that, I think.
I love that. And I think so much of law is about the connection between people and relationships you build. So I love to hear that. And I'm sure that that was useful for you in your work as well. When did law first come into the picture? As you mentioned, the area that you came from, perhaps there weren't that many lawyers around you. How did that thought come into your mind first?
No, there was nobody around me to be honest.
Yeah.
I where I was from, we didn't sort of have people to aspire to. My family hadn't been to university. Nobody was a lawyer who I knew. I didn't know anybody at all. The idea for law, it was a couple of reasons to be honest. So the first one was, I was quite cheeky, so I'd ask questions, and my history teacher told me I should maybe be a lawyer and not a historian, which is interesting. People in my area, to be honest, Shreya, were getting themselves into trouble. So a lot of people who I went to primary school with, for example, have been on the wrong side of the law, and I just thought, well, it might be useful to know a little bit about it. So that's why A-level law came about. And then also, I came from a single parent family. My mum was a cleaner. She worked lots of jobs, and I thought there might be some money in law. I was a bit wrong in the area that I went into, but I thought maybe I can look after her, and maybe I can sort of take us into a different world where money might be a little bit more available to us. So that's the main reason why.
And can you tell us a bit about your journey to getting to a training contract? What was your sort of thought process in terms of the area you wished to do, and how did you get to that part where you sort of got into the firm that you ultimately did your TC at?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I didn't know anybody, as you pointed out, in the law. I didn't know anyone at all. So it was very, I think sometimes law students, law graduates think we have to have work experience in a law firm. I don't agree with that really. I did lots of work experience that wasn't related to the law at all, but it was all very good for me. I worked at charities, did a little bit of work in retail. I did lots of things that gave me communication skills and that enabled me then to be able to get a job in a law firm. So my first job was as a paralegal or legal clerk, I think it was back then, in a family
Mm,
law firm. And I got the job because the guy who was interviewing me, one of the solicitors, I did a little bit of research on him and found out that he was a football fan, and I am as well. And the interview wasn't going great, to be honest. And at the end, I said to him, "Did you watch the game last night?" And then we started talking. And later, when I got the job, he
ah,
called me and he said, "The reason you got the job is because I feel like I can talk to you about things that are not just work." So
yeah.
there's something definitely in that when I've sort of gone through my career and helped people into jobs. Have a think about who it is you're talking to. And so for me, it was a football connection. So I ended up getting a job as a legal clerk in a family law firm. I loved family law. That was absolutely my passion. It was legal aid work, so it wasn't the best paid work. But I've always had a big sense of justice and a real passion, probably because of my upbringing, of
Mm,
helping people around me stand up to authorities. And so I represented parents whose children had been removed. I was a child protection lawyer. Um, and yeah, I got through my training contract, and then the end of my training contract was probably more interesting than the beginning, because towards the end of my training contract, I was coming up to qualify, and I'd done a secondment at a different firm. And I was told by my firm then that I wasn't going to qualify there because there wasn't the quality they needed. Um, and that was hard for me. I was a young woman trying to make
mm.
my way in an industry that wasn't really built for someone like me. So to hear that, and I had some personal things happening as well outside of work. So that was difficult. So it was a bit of a rough ending, to be honest, to my training contract. It ended up coming good, which I'll tell you about if we have some time. But yeah, there was a smooth contract, but then a rough ending for me.
Yeah, and that sounds like a real journey. I think for those who we've had a lot of lawyers who've come on the podcast in all sorts of different areas, but I think that within the work of legal aid, and particularly like you mentioned, within family law, which is just such a sensitive area, and the clients coming are just it's such tough circumstances. Can you tell us a little bit about how you sort of prepared yourself when you were meeting those clients, and any really tough moments that you had?
Yeah, sure. I think this is where skills that you develop as a lawyer are not just the things that you read in textbooks. So again, for me,
Yeah.
I'd seen a lot of life. I didn't have a particularly sheltered upbringing, so I'd already developed quite good communication skills. But one of the big things for me is I learned about law at university. So I read law and I knew the Children Act inside out, for example. But no one ever told me what I will be like at 25 years old, sitting there telling a mother that she's not going to see her kids again. So there's a skill there. And for me, I mentioned my superpower about seeing the person. And for
Yeah.
me, it was being able to hold space for people in their most vulnerable moments, their most difficult moments. They're not going to see their children again. They're going through a court process. My job is not just to be in that moment a lawyer. I've acted as a social worker, a psychologist, or their friend, all of these different things.
Yeah.
So being able to hold space for someone in their most vulnerable moments is a skill that I developed that was served me better than any knowledge of law that I might have had. So it's that connect you mentioned before about relationships in law. That was
Yeah.
so key. And me sort of thinking about the human skills, the
Mm.
people call them soft skills, I call them essential skills. Those things were really important to me. And family law, people would come to me when the children were being adopted or when there'd been abuse. And another thing that I had to prepare for was seeing some of the material that I had to see was horrendously traumatic, and we were never trained for it.
Yeah.
We were never trained to do that job. So it's an interesting area of law. I loved it. I wouldn't do anything else if I was still practicing, but it was hard. And you have to be, I think, a certain kind of person and have a certain kind of resilience to do that kind of work. So I think that what people would call soft skills, they are really needed in family law.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, I guess someone who's thinking about family law and, hearing what you're saying about those really tough moments might be thinking, but at the end of that day, how do I go home to my family and how do I behave normally? How do I go to a football game or how do I go to a lunch with my grandma and try and forget about what I was not forget about what I was doing at work, but kind of compartmentalize that. Is that something that you had to do, or did you feel like, the work was rewarding enough that you were then able to, I guess, put those emotions aside without necessarily thinking about it?
Yeah, well, I think I was someone who was. I'm a kind of personality. I'm either all in or I'm not in at all. So I was very
Right.
invested in my job. But what I would say is, I've just said about the bad parts of it. There are times when your client will text you on Christmas Eve and say, "I'm putting my son to bed tonight because of you. Thank you." So there are
Oh,
so many. It's such a rewarding area. Being able
yeah.
to walk by someone's side while they're navigating a difficult moment is a privilege, really, and is an honour. So there were lots of good moments that outweighed the bad, so it's not all bad. And then, but I guess there is again a skill to that, being able to switch off. And for me, it was about having hobbies, about having things that I enjoyed that would take my mind completely away from work. That was something
Yeah.
else. Football, for example, was one of
Yeah.
mine. I'm a Liverpool fan. I'd go to the game. So these things are really important, and I didn't always get that right, to be honest. I didn't always get that balance correct. And what I'm really encouraging young lawyers who I work with now is to get that balance straight away, because it doesn't get easier. So if you can start trying to learn that balance as you're starting through the ranks in a law firm, I think that'll serve people well. But yeah, I didn't always get it right, but when I did, I would make sure that I had hobbies and other things to do that would take my mind off it completely. And also, if I'm going to be honest, I had a lot of therapy and things over the years because
Yeah.
I needed someone to talk. I was seeing these horrendous things at times, and again, we weren't trained to do it. So I've always invested in my own mental health and well-being as well, and I think
Mm.
that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that because I think it's so important, particularly for lawyers working in such sensitive areas, whether that's family or criminal or even areas which are dealing with, really vulnerable clients. I think it's so important for them to make sure their own mental health is okay
Yeah.
before they're helping people who are struggling with their own mental health because of all the circumstances that they're in. And you spoke a little bit earlier about the end of your training contract being a little bit more rough and perhaps not the best end to what was a smooth start. Would you mind sharing whatever you want to share, what that end was like for you and how you really, the resilience that built up in you to be able to carry on?
Yeah, sure. So, I when I was doing my training contract, I was very lucky to get a training contract. Again, the law didn't seem to be built for someone like me. So I was felt very grateful when I got my training contract. And when I was doing the training contract, I was also doing my LPC part time. So I would work all day and then I'd go 2 evenings a week to uni. Unfortunately, I mentioned before, I was from a single parent family. My mum got sick during that time. And before I qualified, she passed away, unfortunately. So that was rough during my training
Yeah.
contract. That wasn't easy. It definitely gave me a distraction though, and gave me some purpose to move through grief. But at the end of my training contract, so I was at a firm that just did family law. So of course, on your training contract, you have to do different seats. So I had to go somewhere else to a different firm to do my I did an immigration seat, which I loved.
Mm.
Um, so I did the immigration seat, and I went back to. I was due to go back to my old firm to qualify, and when I went back, I sort of asked the question: "Is there a job for me?" And they said there isn't. But even if there was, you're not the quality we need. And I was devastated. So I've just gone
Mm.
through a personal loss. I've just lost my mum. I'm working to try and support my family, and I'm not earning much money at all. I think what was I earning back then? Probably £12,000 a year, something like that. So
Wow.
that was hard. And then I just wanted to give up, to be honest. I thought, well, okay, this is not for me. Maybe the imposter syndrome in me about the girl from the sort of area that was a bit more deprived as an area. Maybe wasn't meant for me actually after all. The reason why I carried on is because I told my mum that I had qualified before she died. So I had to fulfill that promise. So I
Yeah.
did carry on. And I went back to the firm that I was on to comment on and didn't tell anybody. And then randomly out of the blue, a couple of days later, um, I got a call from the CEO of the firm, and he said to me, "Do you know how to do family law?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I do," because they didn't know. They obviously thought I was there to do immigration. And he said, "One of our senior solicitors is leaving. We need somebody. Can you stay here for the rest of your training contract?" And I was like, "Yes, I absolutely can." So it was like a gift. So I called the other firm and said I wasn't going back, and I ended up staying there as a family lawyer. And that was great for me. I inherited someone's caseload who was probably 10 years PQE, so I was in the deep end. But
Wow.
I went on to do really well. I ended up winning a national award for being a family lawyer and all that sort of thing. So it got better. But that moment, I nearly gave up, to be honest.
That's incredible. And, what a journey of, thinking that, especially when someone at that point, like you say, you're already down. And then it feels like, you're being kicked down further. As
Yeah,
you said, you've just had such a big personal loss. And then you're dealing with how incredibly stressful being a lawyer can be, especially in that TC phase where you're trying to prove yourself and
yeah,
you're trying to prove that you're worth what you've been given when so many other people are, vying for that same position. And then to have, made that journey is incredible. You spoke a bit about the imposter syndrome.
mm.
When, I guess through your journey of being a lawyer, did that ever go away? Did that feeling come back to you that actually I deserve to be here? Or was that always there on some level, even when you were a much senior lawyer?
It was always there. It always still is, to be
Mm,
honest. I am a business owner now, and I've
yeah.
obviously had a very good career. Everybody I work with, everybody I know, particularly women, all have imposter syndrome. And that could be CEOs, that could be absolutely anybody. We're all winging it really. No one ever knows
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing. And I think that's important to know because we look at people around us and think, oh, you know everything, you've got all this knowledge. We're all just human. And we all feel it sometimes. I certainly do. I felt it before coming on this podcast with you. I will still feel it. I
Yeah.
can, I've come from being again a young lawyer making my way in the world to someone who became a director at a law firm at a young age. Still felt imposter syndrome every day. So there are things I know how to combat it. There's some strategies that I have that I will use myself and that'll help other people to use to combat it. But it doesn't go away. It's still there somewhere.
Yeah. And if you could go back and talk to that young girl who was, starting out at the law firm and was thinking, oh God, there's no one like me here. I don't know if I'll make it. What would you say to her?
I tell her that the law needs her.
Yeah.
I think that when we're working and we think we can't see anybody who looks like us or who speaks like us or who is from our background in the law, the thing is the law needs everyone. So if
Mm.
everybody was the same and if everybody had the same background and the same skin color and the same religion and the same neurodiversity, everything, then wouldn't it be a boring place? And we wouldn't be representing the clients to the right standard because we need that diversity. So I would go back and tell her to keep going, that the law needs somebody like her, and that actually your background will make you an even better lawyer. So I would give her some reassurance.
I love that. And you mentioned before that you're now a business owner. So why did you decide to make that transition from law to business? What was it that called your name?
Also, I transitioned as I was still in the law firm. So basically, when I was a lawyer, I did well as a lawyer. So a couple of trips to the Court of Appeal that went well. I won a couple of awards, so that was good. I became consumed in it though. I was obsessed with my job. It became my identity, particularly in grief. But then I started becoming really fascinated about people in law firms, and how
Mm.
why do we go to work in law firms? Why do we run our lives on 6 minute units? It's a very odd environment sometimes to be in a law firm.
Yeah.
So I became really interested in that, and because I've always enjoyed sport, I'm a big sports fan. I'm also a big leadership fan, and I really care about quality leadership. So I was mentored by our CEO, who wasn't a lawyer, and I used to ask him a lot of questions about what's the culture. I didn't know I was talking about culture, but what does that look like here? Why are people coming to work here? Why does it work like this? And one day he said to me, well, if you were in charge of culture, what would you do? So I sort of went away, and with some help, I wrote a 3-year strategy and said, this is what I would do. So just as I was turning 30, he made me director of culture at the law firm. So our law firm had 300 people. I was director of culture, so I was responsible for people experience right across the organisation. So I built that up from scratch, really, again with lots of support. So I fell in love with that then. This idea of I've gone from being a lawyer to now supporting lawyers. How can I help lawyers to be the best they can be through learning, through leadership? What does that look like? So I did that for a few years. It's been about 5 years in total at that law firm, and then I made a jump into the charity sector because I needed to see if I was capable outside of law. To be honest, I'd done it for so long; it was my identity, Gemma the lawyer. So I wanted to do something else. I found the idea of business fascinating. About why do we all go to work? How can we make that better for people who
Yeah.
are struggling? And that was really calling me, and I really found my thing, to be honest.
And I think the idea you spoke about of like the transition not just being, one day you decided to hand in your notice and just start a business, but actually learn at the job that you were at, make that
Mm.
transition into learning about culture and then doing it is a much more realistic prospect for a lot of people if they are considering entrepreneurship, whether in the charity, not-for-profit sector or as a profitable business as well. For you, what, and I absolutely love the name Heart Leadership. I think it really, puts together everything that you've been talking about so far. When did I guess the idea of that first come to you, and what kind of gap in the market is Heart Leadership trying to fill, do you think?
Well, first of all, I've always wanted to. I've got ADHD, so my brain will generate a million ideas a minute. So there's always been a part of me that wanted to do my own thing. I like variety, so the idea of doing my own thing and being able to flip between different businesses and different industries was really attractive to me. So I always wanted to do it. Um, it was then about trying to save up and actually do it. So when I left the law firm that I was at, again, that wasn't a particularly smooth exit, but I went and learnt my trade in the charity sector, which I think is important. People think you just decide to start a business, like you said there. I made sure I got
Mm.
the skills that I needed, so I did it slowly. So I would work 4 days a week at Macmillan Cancer Support, and on the fifth day, I would do some consultancy work with Heart Leadership. So um, that's it. It started very slowly. It wasn't just again, I didn't just decide one morning I'm going to do it. Although I would have liked to be honest. I'm quite a risky kind of person.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what wasn't meant to be. And what does it do, Hot Leadership? So we are a small consultancy of Hettel and me. We run the organisation, and we look after three things: leadership, culture, and learning. So the gap in the market really is everything that I've just spoken about to you, particularly in law. Law firms aren't still, I think, up to date with other industries in terms of how culture works in the firms, how they treat people, and how they train people as well. So what we do is let's use law as an industry for example. We might train law firm leaders in how to lead people. We might
Mm.
um, develop academies for organisations where we'll teach them the essential skills that I was talking about. So they have the knowledge, my example again, of the Children Act, for example, but they don't know how to communicate with a client. So
Right.
we will go in and plug those gaps. So we will train lawyers and other industries, but lots of our clients are law firms, on these really important skills. And that could be anything from leadership teams to trainee solicitors to associates, anywhere really. And that, I think, is the gap in the market, is that we are actually lawyers doing it. So sometimes
Mm.
when you go into a law firm and you try and educate lawyers on these different skills, a lot of the time they'll think, you don't know what my life's like. You don't know about my 6 minute unit life. I do. I've walked in your
Yeah.
shoes. I know how you bill. I know how you speak to clients. I know how you get new work. I know the ins and outs of law firms. So that's a little bit of a niche for us, really, because there aren't many of us out there doing it. So
Mm.
that's where what we're trying to do, and we're trying to make law firms better places to work, to be honest.
And like you said, that there is still a lot of learning to do within the legal industry and other industries really, but particularly focused on law in terms of how to lead, what training needs to be provided. When you started, did you face backlash in terms of people saying to you, oh, well, we know what we're doing. We don't really need leadership. And was there a level of like pitching you had to do, or did you feel like actually, no, people are already convinced even before we get to them?
It was a really good question. So first of all, sometimes in law, we leadership is a side of the desk job, all right? So we get heads of departments who often don't want to lead people. They want to be good
Yeah.
lawyers. So when we go to law school, we are trained to be a lawyer. That's what we're
Yeah.
trained to do. We're not trained to lead people or to influence culture. So to be totally fair, people don't know what to do. And then what happens is you might be a really good lawyer and you might be a really good biller and you might be popular with the clients. So you get rewarded by getting a team to lead, which is a completely different job altogether. So then you stop doing the things that you're good at. You're having to lead all these people with all of their emotions and their changing context and everything else. And then you get unhappy. So we know this. We know that this is happening in law firms. Law firms know it too. The SRA, though, recently have done a review of law firms, and it was in 2023, April 23. The code of conduct was updated in terms of culture. So the new rules around fairness and respect. So when the regulator starts talking about it as well, people start listening. I would say so. There's been a mixture of things. There's been um, law firm owners who are very progressive and who have said, "Yep, come in, help us with our culture, help us to train our people. We want people to feel safe, and we want people to feel happy, and therefore they'll be more productive and better for clients." And others have been like, "Oh, we're a little bit scared of the regulator, so we probably need to do something here." So,
Right.
to be honest, I've not. I've definitely had some difficult conversations for sure, where people
Yeah.
have said, well, we don't want this. And I've said, okay, if you're not ready for it, that's all right. But there have
Yeah.
been plenty of firms, I'm feeling optimistic about the legal industry because there have been plenty of firms who've said to us, Gem, Het, can you come and help us out here? And the outcomes have been really positive.
And can you give us a bit of an idea of the sorts of law firms that you've been into in terms of like where they are in the UK and what sort of areas they're practicing in, just so people get an idea of like where this is spreading to?
It's everywhere, to be honest. So I'm obviously northern,
Yeah.
but I've just finished a program today with a law firm that's based around the Kent area, and so we were doing some work with them virtually. We have clients who are global. A few weeks ago, I was doing a session on communication with a team in the Cayman Islands and Hong Kong. So, um,
Wow.
yeah, so there's it's look again, people are people, aren't they? I'm seeing some industries under more pressure. Some areas of law, conveyancing is a big one. Um, they're
Mhm.
under a huge amount of pressure at the moment for various reasons. So I work with a lot of conveyancers, but I probably work with, I would say, probably actually a full range. So some of my clients are small law firms, up to 50 people. Some of them are sort of the mid-size. Some of them are large international firms. So um, there's no real pattern at the moment as to um, who's more interested in this kind of work,
Mm.
but I am seeing certain areas suffering more burnout, and I'm seeing more areas people are either not wanting to go into the law or they're leaving the law.
Yeah. It's so great to see though that from small to big to mid-sized law firms, they're all really promoting that because especially for smaller law firms who maybe have less work coming in, this can be a cost for them. But the fact that they're thinking about the benefits of their team and how it improves their culture, I think is fantastic, and it shows that it's the right direction. Whether that is because of the fear of regulation, or whether they genuinely want to sort of improve, I think both motivations can lead to the same
Yeah,
outcome for sure.
on your point on costs though, it's an interesting point on costs because when people ask me that question, I talk about the cost of replacing people who leave. So, for example, if we say, let's just have an example of, say you have an associate
Yeah.
and they want to leave the organisation, typically what will happen is they'll be looking for around 3 months before they hand the notice in. So you've got 3 months of dropped productivity there because someone's eye is somewhere else. So there's three
Mm,
months. Then they might get a new job and then they hand in the notice, typically 3 months. So the clock starts. Recruiting is hard. So I used to look after recruitment in a law firm. So typically it will take about 6 months to fill. All right. And then someone new starts in the organisation and it takes them 3 months to get up to speed. So if you've got one disengaged person who wants to leave, you've lost a year in productivity. And think about what that costs in terms of
Yeah.
new business, in terms of maybe they've gone off sick, maybe you've got to pay recruiter fees, which are really high. So actually, it's offset very easily. Sometimes the cost of someone working with us on a retained basis, for say we work with a company once a month and we go in every month and we'll do some work with them, that is a whole lot cheaper than one of your star people leaving the organization. People don't really think about that because when people leave, we don't really look behind what that cost is, but actually
Yeah.
there is so much cost attached to it.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting way to think about it. I can see why you're going to the law firm. It's brilliant, and I think that that is something that, like you say, that cost of actually, it's not just the cost of bringing them in, but what you're losing in terms of the people that ultimately might leave because of those cultural issues. Because that's such a big one for sure. And I've always seen posts with you and your co-founder Hetal, who you mentioned earlier, and I always really enjoy seeing them. Can you tell us a bit about how you guys work together and your respective roles at Hartley?
Yeah, so let's say we were in a band, so I would be the front man of the band, and Hettel plays every single instrument. So Hettel, she's also an ex-lawyer, so she's done discrimination, employment, court of protection, family. She's done all of those
Well,
things. Um, Hettel is brilliant at design and at research. Hettel can really quickly get to the heart of a situation,
mm,
and understand what a business needs. So what will tend to happen is when we start working with somebody, we everything is bespoke to that firm. So like we don't do anything off the shelf. We will go in and build something around their culture. So Het
mm,
is great when it comes to doing culture reviews or culture audits and really understanding what a firm needs, and then she will design our materials. So that's what she does. So she's much more comfortable um, on her own, designing really
mm,
great, creating some amazing. Her brain is amazing. And then me, I am the person who will deliver all of the work. So I'm the storyteller. I'm the person who will be standing in front of teams. Sometimes we come together if there's anything to do with. We have sessions on cultural intelligence and we have sessions on leading diverse teams. So we both do that together because Hettel is amazing in that space. So, and we speak to that from a lot of different angles. So, and we do neurodiversity work together as well, both neurodivergent. So any training that we do in that space, we typically do together as well. I'm the more vocal one, I guess, out of the two of us. But that's why it works well. We're so different. I couldn't do what she does. She couldn't do what I do. So
yeah.
together, it's a really, really good team.
And everyone is talking about, AI left, right, and center across every industry. On the point of AI, there's two questions. I think, firstly, with the increased use of AI in the workplace, how do you think that leadership and culture has to evolve with that, particularly for senior partners who don't have as much or haven't used AI for as much of their life as junior lawyers will be? And secondly, in terms of your own role, do you think that AI can ever replace the need for consultants, or do you think that there's that level is always needed?
Okay, first question, AI in the industry. I think people need to embrace it. I think we're not. It's not going anywhere. I think the speed of change now is the slowest it will ever be again. It's only ever going to go faster. So I think
Mm,
if people are ignoring it or are scared of it, then they're going to be left behind. So I think
mm,
it's nothing to be scared of. I don't think it replaces lawyers. I think it can replace some of the more transactional pieces in terms of, it would have been very useful for me as a lawyer with ADHD. I would have loved it. So it can replace some of the more transactional tasks. However, I do think that a human touch is still important. And I think, in terms of leadership and culture and things like that, people have to still come to work. And I think for me, when we're seeing the rise of AI and technology, I think on the one hand it's fantastic and we're so connected, but on the other hand, we've never been more lonely. And I think if you think about it, I talk a lot about community, and one of the things that Heart Leadership talks about all the time is that the workplace, the office, is one of the last communities that we have left, and we need to protect it. So if you think about it, you and I sitting here talking now, I'm sitting in my front room. If I wanted to order food to my door now, I could. If I wanted to do an exercise class, I could just stick the telly on YouTube and do it there. I don't need to leave the house at any point, but I can to go to work. So and I think that connection, that belonging, that humanity, I think we're in a world that's very polarized, and I think AI is useful, but I think we still need that human touch and that human connection to come together more. And I think what I'm seeing now, when I'm seeing the rise of loneliness in leaders and everyone, I think we need that connection even more. So I think AI should be embraced in law firms 100%. And I think, but I don't think um, that will ever replace people. I think, again, back to my earlier example with you, I'm sitting in a courtroom, holding a mother's hand because she's not going to see her kids again. AI can't do that.
No, for sure. And I think, like you say, there's a use for it, but ultimately there is also a need for humans and humans connecting on a human level at always. And it's like AI can be an assistant, can be a
Yeah,
tool, but it can't be the whole thing. And I think that's with every kind of increase of technology that we have for sure. And I guess looking a bit into the future, we spoke a lot about your own transition and everything you're doing at Heart Leadership. Where would you like to see Heart Leadership in the next 5 years? What sort of, what would be an ultimate goal for you in that time?
do you know what? We don't set goals, and that's so
Okay.
we never do. Okay, and we didn't. So we never this. Obviously we need to pay the mortgage, but what we never did was to say we want to be working with X amount of clients each month. We want to be bringing in X amount of money each month. We don't do that. We really focus quite relentlessly on 1%, on marginal gains. So we will always think, how can we be 1% more visible? How can we increase the quality of the experience that people have with us by 1%? How can we, if we can impact this person's life by a little bit, what can we do there? So we're quite big on the quality of what we provide. So, and that's our focus. So our focus isn't necessarily on what it will be. So people have asked me questions. We've had a very, very successful year. We've been really lucky, to be honest. We've delivered a lot of work with a lot of great clients. So people have naturally said, "Will you grow?" And the answer is we won't. It's never going to be this big, massive consultancy that can take over the world. What we would like to do is carry on doing great work with clients that need us. So we value our relationships with our clients. I think one of the things that we will do is put more events on. So on this sense of community,
Yeah.
we've got an event in Liverpool in October called Culture Camp, and we're going to carry on doing culture camps all around the country and hopefully beyond, which is a place for people to come together and talk about work in an optimistic way. So people who
Mm.
are anyone who's interested in the future of work, we want to create these spaces for people where they can come together. Let's be optimistic. A lot of time we talk about work in a very doom and gloom kind of way,
Yeah.
particularly in the law. Okay, but what can we do? How can we use AI? How can we, you know, bridge this generational gap in the workplace? How can we make the quality of work better? So we're trying, as well as the consultancy side of it, we really do want to focus on creating those spaces and those events for people to come together to be able to, if we can all just come together and share ideas and then all go
Yeah.
back off into our respective workplaces, the work's going to be a little bit more positive. So that's where I see it really. I want to, we're enjoying ourselves. And yeah, I don't have any sort of world domination plans just yet. I just want to carry on doing work that we enjoy with clients that we enjoy doing it with.
Yeah. I guess the goal is heart domination as opposed to world
Heart
domination.
domination. I love that. There we go. Just something in nice, Ray. Thank you.
No worries at all. Part of the next campaign.
There we go.
Amazing. Well, speaking of enjoyment, we always end the episode with a rapid fire.
Okay.
So instead of the three questions, I've actually got an extra one for you. Since you mentioned you're a football fan, how did you celebrate the Lionesses' win in Basel? And is that something that you did to celebrate that win? Because it was
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, amazing, incredible. In terms of, I've followed the Lionesses for a long time
Yeah,
because of the history of it. Women's football was banned for 50 years in this country, so I think what they've done is nothing short of incredible. Their manager is an incredible leader, so yeah, I watched it at home, but definitely celebrated, and I've seen lots of positive reactions. So yeah, I enjoyed watching the game. Didn't know how we'd do in the final, to be honest. It's been a bit of a shaky tournament, but actually.
yeah,
No, it was fantastic, and I think the players they're a credit to the country. They're a really good team.
yeah. It was incredible. I saw the parade yesterday in London for it,
Oh, okay.
just
Hmm.
to see that many people supporting women's football and coming out. I think it's such an inspiration, and it's such a, I think it opens so many doors for young footballers and female footballers, coming up the ranks. So yeah, I think it was amazing. The next question is, what does an ideal weekend in your life look like?
Ooh, an ideal weekend. It involves sleeping in for sure.
Yeah.
And then I like taking things easy, to be honest. So if there's no football on, if there's football on, I'm a Liverpool fan. I'll either go to the game or I'll watch it.
Of
Um,
course.
so my weekends mainly centre around that. I've got two Labradors, so they keep us very busy. So out with the dogs on a nice walk, maybe a pub lunch, something like that. But I guess as I'm getting older, I'm not into partying and stuff like that anymore. So a nice meal, just nice relaxed time. Work is very, very busy, so being able to switch off and just actually relax and have some downtime with the family is that's the main thing for me.
The next question is, if you could relive one day of your life, which one would it
It would be my graduation day.
be?
And the
Oh,
reason for that is, so I mentioned that I came from a very poor background and my mum was a single parent, so the day that she saw me with the cap and gown on, she felt so proud, and the fact that you know she'd been a cleaner, she'd raised a daughter to sort of graduate with a law degree was something that she was really proud of, and of course I know I had an auntie as well who was really I was really close to, as well as my mum, my auntie Jean, and both of those were instrumental in my life and really sort of strong female role
yeah.
models. And both of them are not here anymore. So if I could go back and have that day again with them and just see that look in their faces, then that would be my day that I'd relive.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's amazing. And the final question is, what are the top three travel destinations on your bucket list?
Ooh, okay. So first of all, Finland. I want to go to see the Northern Lights, and I want to stay in those igloos in Finland. So I want to do that.
Very
So
nice.
that's that. I want to do that. India is on there. Hetal is Indian, half Indian.
Mhm.
So a trip to India, and Indian is my favorite food. So that will be up there as well. And then
Yeah.
where else would I like to go? Probably somewhere like so what I've got a cool place in Finland in terms of snow and that kind of thing. I've got India, which I'd love to go for a cultural experience. Then probably just somewhere like the Maldives, to be honest, where I can just switch off and no one is there. And the idea of not having my phone and just being somewhere where no one can find me would be lovely as well. So there's my top three.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today, Gemma, and taking out time after your busy day of talking to lots of different people already. We really, really appreciate it. Just as a final thing, where can people find Heart Leadership and find more about you? What kind of links should they be looking out for?
Yeah, so we have a website, so that is heart-leadership.co.uk. So all of our things are on there. That's only just recently been launched, so we're quite proud of that. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, Gemma Ellison. I talk about these kind of things all the time, which
Yeah,
is where you found me. Um,
yeah.
and then we've just started a different project, which I might get some tips from you on actually, which is called, it's a YouTube channel, again, Heart Leadership, and we are running sessions called Real Talk. And in Real Talk, I speak to guests about what's real for them in the workplace at the moment. So maybe I can invite you on, and we can
Yeah.
do this reversed.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, thank you again for taking out the time, Gemma, and we really, really appreciate everything that you said with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
On that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Gemma for coming on Commerce Meets Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with the DM on Instagram at Commerce Meets Law. And you can also reach out to us on our website, which will be linked down in the description alongside all of the social media links. Finally, for extra similar content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel and our TikTok. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.